If you come across this land and you don't see Jesus, it was only a tour.
I'm a follower of Jesus, and as a pastor in Brooklyn, New York, I want to see him from a fresh point of view. So I'm embarking on a journey to 6 vastly different countries all around the world.
We're the most extreme nation in the world when it comes to these values.
Every culture I've encountered has revealed something unique about the character of Jesus.
We need to begin to look out for each other.
And shown me the limitations of my own way of seeing things.
It's a loaded question.
I'm ready to discover, to be challenged, all with the hope of knowing Jesus more. I'm Rasool Berry, and I'm in pursuit of Jesus. If natural beauty is what you're into, white sandy beaches and dramatic mountains, South Africa is the place for you. But maybe you're more of a culture junkie and you're looking for a vibrant art scene and delicious local cuisine. South Africa is also for you. With 11 official languages and even more people groups, you could say South Africa has it all. At the city market, you can see what South Africans aspire to be, the Rainbow Nation.
What's your favorite thing to eat in the market?
What's your favorite thing to eat? Sushi.
Sushi, yeah. What about you?
This is Winner. He grew up in Cape Town, but this is his first time back in a couple years, and he's ready for food that tastes like home.
I live in the US now, and you just don't get it like the same there.
No,
So when I come here, you just have
I can imagine.
So that's what I'm gonna eat until I pass out.
Sometimes people say about a place, if I could sum it up in one word, it might be, yeah, that doesn't work here. Even calling South Africa the Rainbow Nation is insufficient. It wasn't always this way.
So far, I think this is my favorite thing to eat.
The country's current democratic government is only 25 years old. Before then, the minority white population who first came here as traders in the colonial era ruled the nation under a brutal system called apartheid. Apartheid separated the diverse people of South Africa into 4 simplistic racial categories: white, Asian, colored, and black. The White National Party uprooted non-white communities and moved them out of town into racially segregated townships. If you weren't white, you couldn't own land and couldn't vote. Interracial marriage was illegal, and even interracial friendship made you suspect. You stayed with your own race, or you suffered the consequences. Winner's gonna show me around Cape Town, but first, he's gonna bring me over to his uncle's house for dinner, where as a kid, he learned that in South Africa, there's always room for one more, and anyone is welcome to show up uninvited. I guess we're doing it the South African way, because he didn't tell them we were coming, or that I'm bringing an 8-person camera crew along with me.
So you come, you have a plate, and then you get some rice. Make sure you get some of everything.
This dude, Winner, he's a joker, right?
Yeah.
But he says that that's just some of that is just part of the culture. People like to have fun with other people. Is that true? Like things are just fair game?
I'm telling you, man, if you are somebody that comes to South Africa and you have, let's just say, insecurities and you feel, very insecure with who you are and all of those things, like South Africa is probably not the best place to visit. Because, if you stay here for long enough, you will have 5 nicknames, and they will call you under...
on your insecurities.
Yes, it's all based on your insecurities, every nickname.
If you've got a big head, they're not gonna hold back. They will say, "Our copper." Now that in English means our heads. That's something like that, and that will stay on. That will stay with you forever. Yes.
Now I have a confession. I couldn't believe of all the examples you gave of nicknames, you picked that one. Because I grow dreadlocks right now to cover my big head. Because my brother used to call me big head.
So that's what you...
That's why.
Yes.
I feel right at home at this table. Winner's family has welcomed me in, and as an African American, I feel connected to my own roots here And there's a resonance between the story of racial oppression in this nation and my own. So I'm curious to learn more about life here after apartheid.
You know, in the past, we never used to appreciate one another's cultures. I will tell you this, I didn't know a single white person before I came to Cape Town. And then I started meeting people and, you know, getting to know them, their cultures, and respecting them also, and yeah.
It's still sort of separate though. Like, I have like a few white friends, a few black friends, but it's mainly colored. Like, if you go to my campus, you'll see a group of black girls together, a group of colored, and a group of white. And then maybe like here and there's a few mixed groups, but not a lot.
Do you think people here are still hoping for things to change, for someone to come in?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because people are getting desperate. Because it's been 25 years and people are still sitting where they were before.
Yeah.
When you get those who ask, where is Jesus? You know, where is he in these tough times? Let's just question you're floating around in South Africa. And it will always be there.
Yeah, that's good.
That's real. That's real.
At the end of the day, people think that Jesus is our only hope.
So some people are wondering, where is Jesus? And others still hope that the love of Christ will solve all the problems apartheid left behind. Today, all South Africans are legally free to cross racial boundaries, but a variety of social and economic boundaries remain. They were promised the vision of a rainbow nation, but what they see is division. Some artists in Cape Town are processing this tension through street art. I'm visiting the Woodstock neighborhood, and like in my own city, Brooklyn, this is much more than graffiti.
I would like us to stand over here. Now we can have the perfect perspective. So I always want you to get the best perspective of the art piece. It's a very beautiful art piece, especially because of the history of South Africa. We all come from the same roots. It doesn't matter what color we are, what language we speak, what religion we believe in. We should all know we are human beings. And that's why it says living entwined, living connected by our roots.
Zach, a local artist, is our tour guide. I can feel the hope flowing from him, but he's also measured and grounded in reality.
Woodstock is changing day by day. We can't stop change, but we also have to preserve the neighborhood and the people that were there for generations and generations. If you look at Brooklyn.
Same thing.
Maybe you could tell me a bit about Brooklyn.
When you started talking about artists kind of repurposing a space, it reminded me of Williamsburg and Brooklyn, and you know, people coming into old warehouses, and they actually got pushed out by you know, people.
And that's exactly what happened.
Investors and real estate people. They kind of get a thing. Oh, people like this. It's trendy, and before you know it, people can't afford to live there anymore. I've seen street art before, but not like for us, by us. We're going to welcome you into our space. There's that African hospitality meets art. Because a lot of times people can be territorial. Artists can be territorial. Like, I don't want you over here. Here it's like, yo, come on, let's share what we have with you. And that's very unique.
I think for me, what I think about street art is this whole idea of people being able to express themselves. And it's basically them telling a story of what's happening today, like in the city, on a wall.
Street art educates me to believe deeper that we all need one another to exist. And we share walls, so we're sharing spaces, we're sharing with one another.
Yeah, it's good.
Sharing is caring.
When we share walls, we break down walls.
Yes. That's a good saying. I think I'm going to use that one. If it's okay with you.
Oh, yeah, that's all you. We're going to share that.
Exactly.
I like it.
The art in Woodstock shows me the hope of the Rainbow Nation, where everyone shares out of a sense of abundance, and the African ideal, there's always room for one more. But the disparity of wealth and the extreme poverty that many continue to live in shows me a world of haves and have-nots. One of the things apartheid did is systematically redistribute wealth and resources. Imagine it like a pizza cut into 8 slices, and one person at the table takes 7, and everyone else has to make do with the last remaining slice. That's how many who aren't white experience life in South Africa. Winna grew up in that scarcity during the end of apartheid. He started following Jesus as a teen and is now a missionary in the United States.
The original and best.
The original and best. That's what I'm talking about.
But he doesn't seem interested in staying in that scarcity mindset. Right now, he's interested in an abundance of fish and chips.
Yes, we got that. I love that when like the locals are like, "Yo, get this." Make sure that
I'm telling you, they will let you know what.
Now it's funny because the first time I heard the word color, right, I was like, "Whoa!"
You don't say that.
Because in the States, that means something different. Like that was an old, like, kind of more racist term to call black people. But here, like, break that down for me. Like color versus black. What is that?
It's so interesting because for me being a colored guy, if you would say that I'm black, it would kind of be offensive, you know, which is like really funny. Like just like it's this mixture of people and cultures, right? Is really where it comes from because of this being a port city. You know, you had all different cultures mingling and getting together and getting to know each other here.
Mingling, that's a very nice way to put it.
Yeah, and so over the years, I think that's probably like evolved, you know, some of the most friendly people to be around, like they're easy to get to know, everybody is their best friend. But then also there's like, I think like a bigger gap in terms of them feeling like they belong because they've always been in this middle place. You know, back in the day, like not being white enough, but then now also not feeling that they're black enough. And that is a massive part of, I think, colored people's story. I sometimes just realize how fortunate I was, you know, as a little kid having the life I have today, and I would have never thought that would be the case, especially growing up with neither my mom or dad in a home, like my grandma raised me. That's a very common story in South Africa, is, you know, dads make kids and then they leave.
I mean, that sounds a lot like my own story. My parents broke up when I was 2, and my dad was murdered when I was 6.
Oh, wow.
And that makes it tough to grow up and try to figure out, you know, how to be a man and what does it look like. And so then people come up with their own versions of what that means, and sometimes that's not productive. You know what I mean? It's some really destructive things. So it sounds similar, you know what I mean?
That's extra plus fruit.
Ooh, look at that.
That's what I'm talking about. It looks good.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Rasool, so this is the real deal here, man.
All right, so did I do this right?
I think so. I think you got it.
I think I got it. So just peel and play.
You peel. Some of the locals just eat it with the skin. They don't have time to like do the peeling. I eat with my hands, man.
All right.
It's the way you do it. I remember when I finally got to the age of where I understood the whole arc of what has happened in the country, right? You know, obviously there was some anger involved because, I mean, I'm a teenager at this point, right? I'm like, wait, why? This is our country too. I do remember as a kid going to the beach. The beach was like sectioned, where it's whites only.
Wow.
And then other parts, that's basically everybody.
You remember that?
Yes, I do.
In your lifetime, you saw that.
Can you imagine the frustration of growing up in your own neighborhood, but being told in so many words, you don't belong here? Unfortunately, I don't have to. It reminds me of my experiences and those of so many I know and love back home. So where do a black man from America and a colored South African go after talking about segregated beaches? You know we're going to the beach.
This is, there are beaches and then there's this.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Winna took me to the Cape of Good Hope on the southern tip of Africa. It was given that name by the Portuguese because sailing around the Cape opened up a new sea route to connect Europe to the rest of the world. What better place to ask Winna what hope Jesus has to offer a disconnected South African culture?
I think what draws people to Jesus is that whole invitation of there's always room for one more, you know, and I think that's the beauty, because the thing that works for Africans is this theme of there's always room for one more. And so when you present the gospel and it's presented with this idea of there's always room for you, I think that's the thing that makes people want to join in on this whole thing of Christianity, because they feel then loved and appreciated and valued as there always being room for one more.
No one in South Africa modeled this better than Nelson Mandela. As a black South African, he served 27 years in prison for fighting against apartheid. When the government was on the edge of collapse and the country was on the verge of civil war, Nelson Mandela pursued peace and reconciliation. He was released from prison and worked with the government to create a future that worked for everyone. And in 1994, he was elected the first black president of South Africa. He had the opportunity to turn the tables, to take power and get revenge. But instead, he took the leader of the previous all-white government as his first deputy, and they worked to create a country with room for everyone. Nyameka is a friend of mine. She's a follower of Jesus and a member of the Xhosa tribe, the same tribe as Nelson Mandela.
Our country now is technically 25 years old. If you think about a 25-year-old that is alive right now, you know exactly. They're still trying to find things in identity, still trying to figure out what is it that works, doesn't work for them. Our country is very much almost the same. In the Apartheid era, we are all black people fighting the same common enemy. Now, there is a lot of tribalism. I guess people trying to find themselves within their cluster of people. This is my people, I'm standing for my people, and this is your people, you stand for your people. And so, it's working and not working right now. In terms of freedom, I think there is freedom obviously for moving around, but there's still a lot of things that need to be done in our country. We need to rebuild the economy. We need to make sure that we just work together. We are still in the struggle, I think. Some of the stories I'm hearing as I grow older, how horrible it was, and obviously how systematic it was, that you find that they had scriptures to prove why it had to be. They believed that it was biblical, it was godly, but it wasn't. It's what they thought it was, but it definitely wasn't that. So you learn that, and it's my faith. You're like, my faith is responsible for this. You're like, oh wow, that's something big.
How do you reconcile that? The fact that people even use biblical arguments, like how do you reconcile that?
You know, as soon as Nelson Mandela became a president, the church, which was responsible for the structure of apartheid, actually they called him and they did this public apology. They said, we know we are responsible and we do apologize. For me, that means a lot. I hold on to that, even though obviously in the reality of things, it's still not as evident, but I appreciate the fact that they did acknowledge something did happen and therefore they are sorry for what happened. It's going to have good repercussions later on, but at the moment we probably don't see much of it. But I think just because that happened on the spiritual level, I feel like something is going to come out of it.
I respect and admire Nyameka for her patient faith despite the slow pace of change in South Africa, and for the grace she extends to those who distorted the good news of Jesus and weaponized it against her people. But I must admit, I myself am feeling impatient on behalf of South Africans, and my grace is wearing thin. Whether here or back home, it's frustrating to see how the present echoes the past, how injustice and racial discrimination continue on. Table Mountain looms over Cape Town. It's both beautiful and foreboding. Climbing it is exhausting and sometimes seemingly impossible. And it feels symbolic to our present moment, to how far we've come and how far we still have to go. As a follower of Jesus, I try to find solace in the idea that God's kingdom is already but not yet, meaning Jesus is ruling, redeeming this world, but we still live in the midst of sin and suffering. South Africa reveals this tension more than any other country I've been to. I see Jesus here, and the vision of the Rainbow Nation gives me a glimpse of what heaven will look like. But I see the need for Jesus just as clearly. It's painful that the promise of equality has not yet been realized. I find myself asking, how long must I wait for Jesus to make all this right? With the sun setting on my time in South Africa, I find myself exhausted physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I'm heading down the mountain to meet Grant, a white South African pastor. And I'm gonna be honest, this is one of those moments where it feels less exhausting to hike a mountain than to have another conversation about race. What do you remember about apartheid and the transition that this country has had since?
It's a loaded question.
Okay.
I remember growing up as a white kid in South Africa, and for a period of my life I did live under that apartheid regime. I was young, I didn't fully understand it, and I didn't grow up in a racist home. But clearly there was a prejudice that was instilled in you growing up. Just naturally was there. If I was riding my bike outside and I saw a black man walk down toward the station, I'd go inside and wait until they passed. Because in your head, the baddies, you know, if someone's going to be a robber, it's going to be someone who's black. And that's instilled in you by the world you live in. But at the point in which we got to 94, we were on the verge of civil war. I remember my dad sitting us down just before Mandela was released, telling me and my sister, and we were young, he's saying, listen, we might have to give you firearms. Life might change. And I was sitting there listening, and then obviously now being old and reflecting back, seeing how close we were to civil war and understanding it was literally a miracle on the earth. Like, your kingdom come, your will be done. It was like heaven on earth. I mean, for me right now, as a white South African, a man that loves Jesus, wants to see everyone come together, the first thing I need to always reflect on is the fact that on that day Mandela was released, on that day that we broke the grip of apartheid, it was a miracle. Because in the middle of the chaos and complexity of our nation now, sometimes you can become so disheartened at the continual division and conflict that you need to always remind yourself, if God began with a miracle, he's not finished what he's doing. And I know for me that's...
If God began with the miracle, he isn't finished yet. I need that reminder when times get tough and the outcome is uncertain. That the Jesus I follow is capable of more than I can ever imagine.
I think that Jesus contradicted and broke all the rules. And I think that he almost flipped over the laws of nature in the way that he worked. Things like saying the greatest among you will be the least. The fact that the super spiritual Pharisees with their doctorates in theology were offended by his engagement with prostitutes and tax collectors. He went against the culture of the time, and I think in our nation we as Christians have the opportunity to go against the culture of the prejudice which has been so deeply ingrained, and we can do it publicly. We can display it sitting together and having a conversation, having a meal together and coming from different backgrounds. And so there's huge opportunity. I don't have the answers. I just know that at every point in my own life, I acknowledge the miracle of how far God has brought us, and I acknowledge my role in serving everyone equally, no matter where they come from, the same way Jesus did. And in some ways, I pray that it shocks the Pharisees of our context, those that are still creating segregation, those that are still seeing upper class and kind of the poor, uneducated. And so, yeah, it's an ongoing journey. The greatest journey of faith in our nation is for us to walk every day with Jesus, believing for reconciliation without the answers.
Wow.
Because there are books that have been written, there are suggestions that have been made, there are leaders that have come together. But at the end of the day, in my mind, the only way we're ever going to see a full healing for our nation is living every day.
Okay. Let me take it from a different angle. Like, so does that, because that could sound like we just need to believe different and that things don't need to change structurally.
No.
How would you respond to that?
C.S. Lewis said the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And I think that drive and that passion to not remain indifferent is deeply entrenched. I also have a passion for significant change, and not just these little handouts we do as Christians where we then take photos and feel good about ourselves when we go back to the comfort of our church worship services. And so it's that challenge and the passion to do something that's meaningful and beyond
Dude,
me. Heart
I'd
of God.
love to go to your church. I can
Bro.
see why so many people do.
Thank you for
Yeah.
letting me share.
Sometimes when we're struggling, we don't understand what Jesus is doing or where he's leading. The people I've met here in South Africa are teaching me to walk without the answers, while trusting Jesus is the answer. It isn't ignoring injustice or accepting the status quo. It's the ultimate act of resistance. It's how I join God in his plan to heal humanity. And the same is true for structural change. I also look to Jesus, who was not indifferent to the plight of the poor and powerless, but he flipped the laws of nature, power, and society upside down and invites us into a better way to live. In the midst of my despair, I've heard Jesus calling here to trust him. And for those hoping against hope to make things right, there's always room for one more.